Welcome to 101 Part-Time Jobs with me, Giles Bidder. I'm so glad to welcome Duncan Lloyd, Maxïmo Park to the show. They're gearing up to release their new record, Nature Always Wins, which comes out next February. But before talking about how they made that from home during lockdown and after the lineup change and kind of throwing it to the wind with this new record, Duncan takes us all the way back to growing up in Derby, going to art school, trying to figure out his ways and just trying to play in a band, really, and having those dreams realised after working, you know it, 100 part-time jobs. Ding! Maxïmo Park got signed by Warp Records, signing the contract on the Millennium Bridge, sharing Champagne and Nuki Brown. I love that. How that kind of changed his whole career and how he sustained, his career as an artist since then. I'm so glad we got to talk about the new record as well that they produced from home. It's produced by Ben Allen, who's done some great stuff with Animal Collective and Deer Hunter. The singles that are already out sound amazing. This is I Don't Know What I'm Doing behind this. You can go ahead and listen to that everywhere now. That album comes out next Feb. So go and pre-order that if you haven't already. I'm so glad I got to speak to Duncan about all these things that we might not otherwise hear about. So thank you, Duncan, and thank you, Maxïmo Park, for letting this happen. East London's Signature Brew have been brewing music-inspired beers since 2011. They've made beers with Mastodon, Idols, Slaves, Sports Team, one this Christmas with The Darkness called Bell's End. From signaturebrew.co.uk, you can get it delivered directly to your house over this Christmas. And with the voucher code 101podcast, you can get 10% off. Thank you so much for listening to this podcast. If you're enjoying these episodes, I ask you to share them, to try and spread the word about the show, to try and get more people listening, because if we get more people listening, we can get more guests on the future and we can build this together. One thing that I've kind of realized in the last couple of months is that really this show is about communication, and with that comes a form of community. Everyone's stories are different and they're all as interesting and as valid as each other. And that's something I really want to promote with this show. That's kind of my responsibility with that. So thank you so much for getting on board with that and listening to this show. So if you could share this episode, if you could tell your friends about it, that would be massively, massively appreciated. Here's Duncan Lloyd from Maxïmo Park. Hope everyone's having a great week. Go well. Cheers! Thanks so much, Duncan, for joining me on this.
No problem, man. It's good to join you.
You've just recently announced Nature Always Wins, 2 singles from it. How does it feel now?
Well, it's good. It's good to get it kind of going, really, because, obviously with this year being the way it is, there's always the doubt of, should we be putting something out now? But I think that there's kind of a momentum, when you kind of get a record done, you want to keep that going because you're almost a few steps ahead of yourself. So it kind of feels like the right thing to be doing. And even if we get it out next year, we'll see how next year pans out. But there is now a bit of a light, at the end of the tunnel. So it feels like, hopefully we can get things moving. But fundamentally, I think we just want to share some new music.
Do you feel quite well versed after, all these years, all these different records as a solo artist as well? Do you feel quite used to the campaign trail?
In some ways, yeah, but I think you kind of switch your mindset a little bit, or you have to kind of move away from being from that kind of creative mindset and kind of in your own head, or whether you're with the band or on your own, you have to move from that. You don't really think about the whole outside of of just making music. And then when you suddenly thrust back into it, everything from, like social media to, just having to write a new biog and stuff and photographs and all that, it's suddenly like, this is that's the stuff that kind of feels, more difficult to deal with in some ways. You have to get used to that again. But we're getting there again. You're getting back to doing filming and stuff. And, because, sometimes music making can be quite almost like a private thing in some ways, so
totally. Yeah.
Getting back into sort of being out there is almost like rubbing your eyes and looking at it again and going, oh, right, there's that again. So it is a little bit of a shock to the system, but I think at this point, I think we're all limbering up a bit again and, looking forward to hopefully playing some gigs and stuff like that. It's a bit different this time, of course, but yeah, I think you do have to switch back into that kind of role of being coming outside of yourself a bit more,
That transition of making a record, you say it's like a private thing, and I can totally see that. Surely you have to be doing it in this kind of private environment to be yourself in a way, right? Do you find the transition of having that such a private thing and then taking it to the label, PR, producers, that whole side of it, are you quite is that quite easy for you to do, or is it hard for you to do?
I think it's easy if certainly mainly with the band, feel confident about the songs. I think we work on them we don't like to just send out an idea that's kind of not quite there, or a demo that's not quite there. We sort of like to realize it to some degree ourselves, because I know with some artists, they'll just go, well, I've got this little thing and I want to work with a producer. We tend to turn up with things, pretty much fully formed, but we want to mess with the sound. We want to play with the arrangement, so we'll feel confident ourselves first before like presenting to anybody. And people go, we want to hear stuff. It's like, no, you can't until it's kind of weird feeling good about it. So, it is a weird thing, because I think a lot of musicians I know are quite introverted, and switching to kind of having to sell yourself a bit is an odd feeling. So there is that element of, oh yeah, I've got to really kind of say how, excited we are and how good it is. Whereas a lot of the time it's the involvement is, the thrill of making it is there, but it's hard to kind of express that other than through the music itself. So it is a funny transition, but it's, in some ways, yeah, it's not necessarily difficult. It's just a little bit odd, I'd say.
Yeah. You've done film compositions along the way, but you've also been a painter.
Yeah.
How do you come at those things from a similar angle, from the way you do write songs for Maxïmo Park? Are there any common threads along those?
There's definitely parallels. The Decade in Exile thing, I've sort of, I've not done much of that for a while, so I just work under, just Duncan Lloyd. So it's kind of, it's in some ways that sort of stuff I guess it's more personal in a way, and I can feel I can be a bit more experimental. It doesn't necessarily have to, tick certain boxes. I think with Maxïmo Park, it's because we're a collaboration. We have to find this common ground, which is what I'm talking about, more than it necessarily being tick boxes for a label or whatever. It's more like for the people you work with. We're really into sort of the melody and the thing being there's something you find that we all tend to grab onto with certain songs. They have to have this thing, whereas I think working independently, there is, obviously lyrically it's more personal, but also it's I think musically I could spread my wings a bit further, because I'm not really trying to I guess impress on anybody else, really. It's a little bit of a journey. I think, like with most people, it's a way of expressing ideas that perhaps may not get used in the band, but purely because they are like I guess that there is a way more personal thing, which is a bit harder to share in a group, because it's a different beast in a way.
And we all need our personal things, whether you're an artist or not an artist. We all need these things that are rightfully ours, and that's not coming from a weird kind of me way, but we all need our things to make us feel good about ourselves. And I wonder, if doing stuff under Duncan Lloyd or painting and and doing film compositions that allows you to just experiment without having to worry too much, about, are our fans really going to love this or not? Am I right in thinking that you might be able to just be like, I'm just going to go for this, see how it sounds, see how it looks like?
Yeah, exactly. It's you just make it as in the most natural way, I think, because I think every day I sort of, there's something, sometimes I think there's maybe something wrong with me, because I'm always needing to make something, and whether that's purely just for myself or just I want to see what this sounds like or what that sounds like, or certainly with painting as well. It has been. I've got back into painting more recently because I left it for a while, and that has been just great. Just even just using different brushes and different makes of paint and stuff, just to kind of see how it sits and see how it, how it works. And again, it's purely because there's this drive, which I don't really know where that comes from, but I kind of feel like making things is kind of what makes me tick. So, and a lot of that stuff, like with the music, it just sits on the shelf, or, there's hard drives full of stuff that I'm like, will I ever finish that? But it's more like going through these processes purely just because the idea is there, or the need to make something is there, or experiment is there. But there's no, at the end of that, I don't know what's going to happen with that stuff. So I don't really feel like I just want to make something good, or fulfill something that is like nagging at me in the back of my mind, So, but yeah, with a band, there is in some way perhaps more focus to communicate to the outside world on, perhaps a slightly louder, clearer level. Whereas I think, it can be, maybe harder to get into the idea of selling this solo stuff, because I find that the whole kind of pushing it out is quite difficult, the selling side of it, because unless you've got a team behind you, which bands often have, they have people to kind of help you a bit with this and that. But it's interesting. The two sides of it are interesting.
Do you pay much attention to what's going on in indie music, guitar music? You mentioned earlier before we started recording that you like Marika Hackman. Do you pay attention to what's going on now? Do you read, I don't know, NME or DIY magazine online, any of that stuff?
I delve in a bit, and I'll kind of see what's going on, and I like listening to music across different genres, and I've got more into slightly more experimental stuff recently, just what I listen to. I think with indie stuff, I certainly have a soft spot for that, and I liked a lot of the stuff, New Zealandy kind of stuff, and stuff in the States that is perhaps a little bit more underground. So I like bands like that are either coming through or that it's not like fully produced and stuff. That's the sort of stuff that interests me, and I tend to find that through searching. You're going down rabbit holes, really. I'll go on YouTube, or I'll maybe Spotify or whatever, and I'll just go and search up and like, what are the bands are they linked to? What was the area they came from, and what's happening there? So I think that's how I tend to discover music that way, or just through records friends recommend, or I might even see something on Instagram and go, that looks interesting, I'll check that out, so I do for modern stuff, I do check out what's going on, but it's not, my main interest is just finding interesting stuff, whether it's from now or whether it's from way back. It's sort of, if it catches my eye or ear, I'm like, I'll find out about the thing.
Talking about lo-fi stuff, there's so much of it come over the last few years, and something's going on outside. So much of that lo-fi stuff has come out in the last few years, and you can see why. With GarageBand and just affordable USB mixing desks and the lot. Does that have any effects of the way that you look at the production of records that you're making now? Does that inspire you, or do you have any thoughts on that when you're making a record in the studio?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, our whole beginning, certainly my beginning, I went to the Confetti College in Nottingham, the People's College. I learned how to sound engineer there, so I learned how to record kind of the end of the 90s, start of the noughties. I sort of I wanted to learn how to record, so that sort of DIY, making it yourself stuff has always been, it's basically the roots of our group in terms of recording wise. And on this record, I had to kind of bring out a lot of those skills just to be able to record it, because we had to do it in isolation. So a lot of the bass and keyboard parts and guitar stuff I had to record either at home, through USB onto Pro Tools, or sometimes I use some tapey bits and bobs and just to get certain sounds going. But I think the fact that it's the norm now it's interesting, because I think when I started, and buying a sound card was the first thing to do after having a Tascam, 4-track or whatever. Then
Yeah.
just to be, and obviously I know Paul, he records on GarageBand a lot. But yeah, I kind of learned how to use Pro Tools fairly early on, because I did this course. I was a bit lost, and I started doing this course at Confetti, and I'd been a fine art student before that, and I just thought I need some kind of skill, So yeah, despite all the student debt, I ended up learning that sort of stuff, and it's just been really useful ever since. It's kind of so when I do listen to stuff now, and I hear people have done it at home, that's great, because I think a studio album is very different, and it's amazing to use all these compressors and tube stuff and all that expensive gear and just beautiful desks and things, and that totally has its value. But I think the fact that anybody could make a record, and it's affordable to make a record, I think that is positive, because anyone making music or who's creative needs some kind of outlet, and that allows you to do that.
In the late 90s, early 2000s, what was your life like around then? Was there that kind of infrastructure in education, higher education, I mean, where you could survive doing that?
Well, I'd say no. No and yes. I think initially I'd left art. I went to Northumbria University. I'd left art college with a lot of student debt. But I think I caught the last year of the grants in my second year, so I had a bit of help from grants. But then it was kind of full student loan, and I was in quite a lot of debt. I did loads of odd jobs. I did a lot of I've done all sorts of different kind of jobs. But by the time I got to realize, okay, I want to do some sound engineering, I want to do a 2-year course. I remember having to get the bus from Derby. I was living in Derby at the time. That's where I'm originally from. And because I'd moved back there from Newcastle, and I'd get this bus called the Red Arrow across to Nottingham. And I was paying for it on a credit card because I didn't have any cash. And then a friend of mine, he was like, you can't pay bus fare on a credit card. You've got to, you've got to get some help. He said, there's this hardship fund. So I got the hardship fund, luckily. And that helped me get through the course, which was 2 years. It was a brilliant course, and I just learned so much. So I kind of found out through a friend of mine that I could get this money to help me, and then I did waiting jobs. I was a pot washer. That kind of helped me through college, and just to pay the rent, really. So and I guess I've always had these part-time jobs to pay for, just wherever I was living, and just to feed myself or whatever. And it would be okay. The rest of my time would be taken up by either making music or painting. So there were always like jobs that were a little bit like a means to an end in a way, just to afford to do what I really wanted to do, And
Maxïmo Park started in the background of that, did it?
Yeah. Maxïmo Park started. There was just 4 of us at first, and we were a bit of a nervous bunch, and we got into things like, there was a thing called Diesel New Music, which was in London, which we went down for, and we managed to trash a hire van on the way down.
How did that happen?
Oh man, we got to London, and I won't say who. Somebody parked a bus, and there used to be these big kind of weird bell-shaped bollards.
Yeah.
And that got driven over and just crushed the entire side of the bus.
No.
So we were a bit shaky, played the gig, drove back, and then there was this massive bill to pay. So that was a bit of a downer. But I think as well, there was little things like in the city in Manchester we played, but we weren't, this was before Paul had joined, and I think we felt, sort of artists just didn't feel quite comfortable being a singer. And I was similar at that point. I just felt that, we sort of shared duties between Archie's, me and Lucas. So that was when we decided to get a singer, but it had started, the ball was rolling, and but it was pretty eclectic. I think we were just developing a kind of a sound at that point, and then it all sort of came together at the right point, I guess, when Tom's friend Paul came along and started singing for us.
And there was that period of time where, it was in that kind of period of time where if you had an A&R person at your show, then that's a step.
Yeah. I remember when we went back to In the City in Manchester with fully formed with Paul. There was the guy who signed Radiohead was there, and there was various people, and it was just like, wow, these kind of industry people that you are just kind of imaginary figures, A&R people. Do they ever come to Newcastle? It was weird, and they were there and chatting to us, and they were like, we think you've got something, blah blah blah, and then we didn't really hear that much, but I think it probably helped spread the word a bit, certainly perhaps in London. And then it was only really until we pressed up our first 7-inch single, which a friend of ours helped kind of fund, and Lucas took it to London and took it into Rough Trade. It was only really then that they made it a single of the week, and it was in the window. And
wow.
Then we started getting some emails, like Warp Records and I think Parlophone, EMI, people like that got in touch, and it was just quite surreal, just through this single of the week thing in Rough Trade. So, but it was that was really buzzing at that point. We were just getting pretty excited that people were getting it, Did
you have this kind of realization that you had to start being, because I can completely imagine amongst all of that excitement, there has to be one of you or a part of you that thinks, okay, let's be smart about this. Let's try and organize ourselves that we do this in the best way we can.
Yeah, I think that probably came when Paul first joined. I think we agreed that, despite us, having a few just minor kind of successes in our little world, that we would, when we next did a show, we wanted to be the best band in Newcastle, first of all. And it was like, well, we need to be super tight. We need to practice loads, and we just need to make our songs like really strong, so the focus was there. We just hung out as a little, gang of friends. We'd go out a lot together and, go clubbing, and you would listen to everything that was going on at the time. And a lot of our musical tastes were tying up together. We used to go down to a market called the Quayside Market on Sunday. You could get really cheap vinyl down there. So we would just get everything from The Fall to like Flaming Lips or whatever we could find. We would pick up old Wire records, like Chairs Missing, things like that. And we would just kind of saturate ourselves in that stuff. And then, Captain Beefheart was another big one. The sort of,
yeah, great.
I always thought that the more kind of, people used to say kind of post-punk, but it was really more Beefhearty. The kind of angular stuff was more from that. But all of that we listened to, and then we just rehearsed a lot, did our part-time jobs, met up on Tuesday nights, and then at the weekend, and then we would go out and then jam after we came back out and all that sort of stuff. So, we were like, we won't do any gigs until this thing feels like it's just super strong. And then we started booking some shows. And I think, immediately people were like, oh, right, there's something going on with them, So, and I think the fact that each show, it would grow in numbers, people coming. And we played a gig at Red's Bar, which is at Northumbria University. And that was a big moment, because it just like the place was filled, it was rammed, and it was like, oh, okay, this is, people are getting it, and we're on the right kind of path here. So I think we'd built that up. So we were ready to start touring around and just going around the country playing places,
Did you know, I mean, looking back now, did you think you knew at the time that you were in the right place at the right time?
It definitely felt like it was becoming more exciting, certainly for, I guess, guitar stuff, because I guess in the early noughties, though, I guess with the White Stripes and the Strokes coming over and just becoming really popular, it did open the door for bands that had been kind of toiling away and trying stuff. You realize that, oh, okay, this kind of more energetic guitar stuff is becoming kind of popular. And obviously before it got perhaps too saturated, there was only really a handful of bands that you'd heard of that were making albums at the same time or had just put theirs out before ours. So they felt like a bit of a generational shift. And a lot of the influences felt similar, across across our generation, I guess, whether it's Franz Ferdinand or Block Party or sort of our stuff and Future Heads and stuff. I think there was a sensibility, there was a DIY sort of thing. We all came through that. So there was definitely a feeling that something was happening. And, certainly when we went to London, just how exciting it was in London and Manchester and Glasgow. It was just, everyone just seemed really up, it's like they wanted something new and something to happen. And I think before that, maybe it was a little bit, like some of the chart stuff, a lot of acoustic guitar, slow ballads and sort of nice kind of songs. It didn't really reflect, I think, how a lot of us felt. There was a bit more desperation, hence the energy, I guess, of that. So yeah, I guess there was a feeling certainly during that time.
There's so many bands now, like Shame, Sports Team, Working Men's Club. Idols are obviously huge. I wonder if it's a cyclical thing, because those bands, some of those bands have cited Wire as an influence. Certainly The Fall, this kind of angular post-punk rock, whatever you want to call it. Do you think it's cyclical?
Yeah, possibly. Yeah, because you it's like when you look at like late 80s, early 90s music, that was a thing. And then, I remember that being some of the stuff I first got into when I was really young, whether it be some of the shoegazy stuff or some of like Nirvana and stuff like that. That sort of happened. And then later on, you sort of mid to late 90s is sort of obviously the Britpop stuff. There was, and the influences there, it's like Elastica were influenced by Wire, for example, and
yeah, you wouldn't think that, would you?
Yeah, it's funny. And I don't know, there's lots of, and then I think as well, at the start of the noughties, we got into a band called Life Without Buildings, which we just all loved that band. And it was really kind of interesting, slightly wiry, a little bit post-rock. And then, of course, like a band like Electrolane, we heard them, and just, they were like one of our favorite bands of the noughties. And they supported us on the show once. And I still, they're still massively underrated, but they were, again, it was a band there was a bit of a new wavy element. And I think there's the essence of punk in whatever way, whether you're playing more classic punk or more, whether it's punk in your mind or whatever, it's, you're doing it yourself, and you're just wanting to escape whatever it is you're from, and you're wanting to kind of talk for your own generation in a way, but on first point, it's just communicating. You want to communicate with whoever comes to see you. And I think, there is definitely a cycle you can kind of see as it bounces along every few years. And then it's the same with electronic music, I guess. But electronic music is like, it's constant now. It's mainstream, and synths and whatever it is that you make your music on, and including, we use a lot of synths as well, but it's there. But I guess the thing with guitar, because it's kind of quite, it is stylized. So I certainly looked at American bands were a big influence. I was a big fan of Sonic Youth, and I loved when all that stuff first came over, when Nirvana was just really starting out.
And those bands loved coming to England, or, so you read about in interviews.
Yeah, I guess because our history, certainly when you go over there and you hear so much English music in bars or at clubs, whether it's Depeche Mode or Joy Division or New Order, there's like so much British music is played in shops and things. You're like, it's everywhere. I realized last time I went, I was like, there's hardly, there might be a little bit of kind of Americana country stuff, but there's a lot of British stuff. And we were chatting to Ben Allen, who did the new album, about that. And he's like, there's kind of this golden period that a lot of Americans reference. And it is a lot of that stuff kind of, I guess, in the, I suppose, late 70s and 80s, and everything from The Cure and to stuff that's a little bit new wavy, even edging towards new romantic-y kind of stuff, that is kind of seems to fascinate, I guess, people over there. And for us, we, when Nirvana came across, and all the bands that came with that, whether it be kind of the heavier stuff or Nine Inch Nails, or whether it be the melodic, like, I was into the Lemonheads and stuff because of the
massively,
just the pop element, that. And I remember watching The Word, there was a program called The Word, And I was kind of, when I was too young to go out, I just used to watch all the bands like every week on that. And it was like, yes, this is just the best thing on TV. And it was kind of trash TV, you know, it was like, there's somebody drinking a pint of bile and, you know, and somebody, it's just really weird stuff. And then there was obviously all the rave stuff and the rave stuff and the dance stuff. And going out during that time, everybody just seemed to get on. You know, you could go to an indie club or a rock club, or you could go down to a dance club or techno stuff. And there was a real cross pollination, you know, during that time. And yeah, people used to just really hang out a lot. And I guess this is pre-internet. So going out was the main way of seeing everybody. And it was, you know, there was definitely something that connected everybody together at the end of the week, and everybody being together and, you know, celebrating and stuff. So yeah, it's kind of, yeah, when you look back, you start really thinking about it and go, oh yeah, you know, that's what was happening then. But
I just missed out on the sort of days of the indie nights. I was just a bit too young for that. Yeah,
they were. I think, it's from where we sort of came from and our influences, and certainly that time period. I mean, I remember Britpop at one point. It just felt really bloated at one point, and I guess you could say the same after a while. You know, certainly once the Arctic Monkeys had become big, and then there was just so much stuff that it felt like it was like a saturation to a point where the kind of tastemakers were getting a bit lost. You know, you couldn't really. Something fresh needed to happen. And I guess in some ways we never stopped just doing our thing. We always felt slightly outside of it. Maybe because the demographic where we are, you know, we do feel a little bit like Newcastle isn't like Manchester. It's not like London, or, you know, it's closer to Glasgow, but it's self-contained, and, you know, musicians really have to kind of help each other out, and there's this kind of camaraderie. But there's also this slight isolation thing where you just feel like, well, we'll just go back to just getting on with what we do, and then go and face everything else later on. So, but yeah, I think, it was a great time. But I think since then, it's, with things changing, it's been fascinating, just surviving as a band. You know, it's the graft you kind of have to put in some ways is part of the survival of it, but still really caring about the music and the songs, you know, and that communication between us and the people who want to come and see us. You know, it's still kind of really important, I guess.
I think anyone can, you know, be forgiven for being a band and seeing a blueprint of something that's going well for a group of bands, and then being attracted to that, trying to, you know, maybe subconsciously kind of shape yourself to kind of help, you know, fit your band into that kind of circle. So in that period of time of Arctic Monkeys and Block Party, did you ever, you know, were you ever at risk of doing that to yourselves a little bit, you know, knowingly or not?
I think we already, once we started, I think obviously we got signed just after a few bands that of our generation that kind of had a sound that was similar. We were, you know, it was classically, you kind of get lumped in a bit, which is fine because that happens every time. But I think
it's always going to happen in rock journalism, right?
Yeah, that's it. And I guess people want to, you know, there's a movement, there's a scene, there's something happening, you know, so that's why it's exciting. Everybody needs to go and see this stuff, you know. So it makes sense in journalism completely, and, you know, you understand that. And it's I think like it's going back to when we decided that what we were going to do, that we were going to be strong as a group, we were going to sound tight, and we had our songs down. Before we'd even heard of, you know, say Block Party or even Franz and stuff, we were already, you know, 2/3, perhaps more of our album was written already. So we came out, you know, slightly after, but we'd already formed, you know, who we were going to be. So I think that has never really changed. We've been very strong-willed about who we are, because I think we needed to be the different band from Newcastle. We had to, you know, even the second-hand suits that we would get, or suit jackets, and we didn't want to look kind of Britpop indie. We didn't want to look like that. We wanted to say, you know, we wanted to look a bit sharper. The music felt sharper, and we wanted it to be, you know, really in people's faces at first, but them to feel it. There's always been an element of the melancholy and just the connection of kind of we wanted it to be heartfelt as well. It had to be about life, and it had to be about things we had witnessed. It had to be real, and that I think is one of the keys that has carried us through, is that the songs, are about real things, and a lot about Paul's life, and they are, I guess they're honest in that way. It's not so that always led us through whatever's happening, that identity and that sort of the need just to kind of communicate in our own way has always been there. And it's not, although we got lumped in, or we at one point, or we were part of some early thing that was exciting, and then afterwards, are we part of that? Are we part of this? It didn't matter. I think you lose focus if you start worrying about that. So
it's interesting you talk about the lyrics, because I think that you hear that as a fan. I think, you can hear when someone's chatting bullshit, basically, can't you?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. It's like, baby this and that, or, let's go out and get messed up, whatever, that's fine when you're kind of 14 or 15 and, and you're just learning to write and you just want to figure it out. But I think, we've never really kind of, we've never done that. It's, I think it was from the word go. It's like, let's make this stuff mean something, let's make it. I think we were all going back to doing kind of dead end jobs. And it was the reality of, are we going to get out of this? Are we going to ever pay our debts off? It was all that kind of, there was a pressure just especially in your 20s, I think you feel it, certainly in your mid 20s. What am I going to do? Where am I going to go? And I really want to do this. I want to be in a band, and, I want to, we care about the music and stuff, but it's, who knows if that's ever going to happen, but all we can do is do the best, we can do, and keep working, whether it's, doing pot washing, or, I was a care worker for a while. All these different jobs were there, just keeping me ticking along. And, the other guys too, to a degree, they had their people worked in call centers and all that sort of stuff. But it was, I'm rambling now, but you know what I mean.
No, I love it. You're bringing it back to the name of the podcast. I'm going to have to thank you later for doing that, because I'm awful at doing it myself.
It's funny, because last night I was like, I must think of the jobs I've done, and I sort of thought, God, what have I done? And I started trying to think of a list of them, just in case, like I was just thinking, okay, I've been a car valet. I used to clean chicken ovens.
Chicken ovens?
Yeah, oh man, it's like mopping chicken grease on the floor. It's just, it's you can't win. It's, you pour water on it and it just gets worse. And stuff like, being a charity fundraiser, doing order picking in a warehouse, all that sort of stuff. And
charity street fundraising is a weird one, because you realize, maybe you had a different experience. I certainly realized, why am I working here paying for the office space of this charity and all the people that work in it, and not actually what the charity's designed for?
Yeah, it's pretty thankless. And it's like being stuck out there, certainly when it got to winter. I remember going out to, I think it was Seaham, which is, in the northeast by the coast, and just people walking past and looking at you like you're absolutely, you don't know what you're doing, why you're there. And you can tell it's like, sorry, mate, and it'd be amazing though, the people who would sign up. You can't have any kind of assumptions about who would sign up, but that you're right, you do feel like, is this the right thing to be doing? Is this the right way? You don't really see it so much now, but there was a real boom, of that.
Yeah. I've got to feel guilty. I feel guilty for saying that, especially having been there myself. But when you see someone charity street fundraising, it like strips them of all their respectability, doesn't it? Not in a way that I don't respect that person, but more in the sense that, like, I do everything to not make eye contact. I pretend they're not there.
Yeah.
You kind of avoid them without letting them know that you're avoiding them.
That's right. It's because you've been on the other side of it. So that they're not gonna look at me, and I have to stare at them. And then the problem, I remember thinking, I'm just a bit too chill. I just end up kind of daydreaming about stuff, or, and it's like you get a call every hour, like, team leader, right, what have you got? The boss is calling, and we just end up signing each other up. and then cancelling a month later just to try and get the numbers up, because like, we're not going to get any commission here or any money here, you know. And but then you're thinking about the charity, and it's, you know, some of them are really, it's essential stuff, but you're just like, this is a weird way to make money. But I mean, the three of us got fired in the end because we weren't making enough, and then I ended up doing being a care worker for autistic lads. So, you know, take them out on day trips and stuff like that.
Right.
And that was kind of rewarding. That was just before the band took off, you know. So there was, I think, and even like just selling sort of paintings, the odd painting here and there would help. But you know, there was little things, and obviously the doll. We're all on the doll at some point in between jobs. But yeah, it was. I always think that goes hand in hand, because the jobs, like even waiting, I remember working with just people from all walks of life, and it really helps you, especially when you're younger, when you're in your early 20s, you really start seeing all walks of life and how to adapt to people from, you know, every different background, but also the empathy just for one another, because you're working together and you're all trying to just survive. You know, I think there's that kind of mentality. It kind of stays with you, especially and it goes into being in a group. There's a bit, you create a survival instinct, you know, even if your characters sometimes clash, or they might be sometimes, you know, there's different ideas, you still have this kind of respect, and like, we're still working together, and we can ultimately, we're trying to kind of do something we love and make it work, you know.
Did you meet anyone at any of those jobs that really stuck with you? I mean, and, you know, working with autistic kids, that must have been we watched the Peanut Butter Falcon movie last night, and it's really, really great. And me and my partner were just talking about how when you work with someone with disabilities, or you're friends with them, or they're a family member, you know, you have fun in this different sense. You know, there is a different way of looking at the world.
It is true. It's true. I mean, my younger sister, she had a lot of problems and stuff, and she actually has to live in a home. And I think because I've always had that, there's that one of the reasons I think I got the job, because I understood, you know, that when you go out, when we used to go on holiday and stuff, and she would, you know, make noises that would kind of alarm people, or they would sort of, you know, get quite worried what's going on. But it was just her just making a noise, or, you know, she's just like, oh, I'm outside, I'm going to shout, you know. And in some ways, I think because maybe as well, it was late 80s or whatever, when I was a kid, it was quite difficult, because I think people would judge people with disabilities at points. And that really, you know, I think for anybody who was slightly outside of what was considered normal, I was always feeling empathy towards, because it's like, don't judge people who aren't, you know, perhaps don't fit the normal things, because it's not, you know, it's way broader than that. And I think that always stayed with me. And certainly when I worked with, there's a couple of brilliant lads I worked, you know, looking after, we go on day trips, and one lad was just amazing with stuff like numbers. And he would, first thing he'd ask is what your birthday was, and he'd tell you what day you were born on, like that. It was amazing. And, but his kind of view of the world and what he found interesting was fascinating. And we would go into like we would buy stotties, these big kind of bread kind of cakes for his mum, and he kind of found it really funny to kind of scare old women by shouting Marvel characters are going to get them, like whatever. It'd be like, Green Goblin's going to get you. And these grannies were like, what's going on with this lad? And bless him, you know, it was just his kind of thing. But then we'd go to the old folks' home and play dominoes, and with the old folk there, and he would make you know, cups of tea, and he was just really sweet with them, you know, and they were just like, he's great, he's brilliant. And there was another lad, you know, I worked with, who he was more severely autistic, but he would walk and walk and walk, and I just got so fit looking after him, because we would just walk down to Newcastle. We used to get the bus to Durham, and yet seeing the world through his eyes, you know, it is fascinating, and it's also, they're people, and they have that, you can see they're experiencing things in a different way, and that's it is truly eye-opening. But it's also, it's rewarding just to be there for them, so that I remember that was one of my sort of best jobs before. I was quite sad to leave that, but I was also, once getting signed, I was like, I could pay off my student loan finally.
Yeah.
Like more than anything, getting an advance, actually having money in the bank was like, yes, But yeah, it's true though that experience, again, it does help kind of shape certainly my outlook. And I think all of those little jobs where, I remember Car Valley and spraying off hard wax of, new cars had coming in. You used to have to spray it with kerosene to get all the, all the kind of protective layer off new cars, and just going in, just this chemical would just be, for weeks, I'd just be a little bit messed up from breathing kerosene. And then I'd valet the inside. And if you missed a bit, you had to do it again if it wasn't perfectly shiny. Yeah. It was kind of brutal in a way. But I remember that, again, it kind of helped, I guess, character and stuff. It helped me just, it was a dose of reality. These jobs are, they just help, I guess. So now, this is kind of a bit of a dream, just to still be able to make music. It's still like, I'm grateful for it, I guess.
How did you take it then after all those years, kind of, making bits and bobs of cash here and there? How did you personally take it when you got signed? That first year.
It was a bit like, it was like we'd been released. It was just the best time. I think all of us were buzzing, and we signed a record deal with Warp. So Steve Beckett, head of Warp, he came up to Newcastle. We'd met him in London before. We met a few labels, and they were the ones who were going to let us have the most creative freedom. So it wasn't the biggest money, but that didn't matter. It was like, will they let us make the record how we want to? Because a few labels were like, do this, do that. We want you to change. The coast is always changing, so that intro isn't there, and you get to the chorus quicker. And we're like, nah, we're not going to do that. So I think when he came up and we'd met him in London, he said, I want to sign you. We're like, we want to sign with Warp, because although it felt strange as a label, they were trying to do, more sort of, I guess, guitar groups and stuff. We signed the deal on the Millennium Bridge, in the middle of the bridge, and we had a bottle of champagne and a bottle of Newcastle Brown, and we just mixed the two in these glasses, and then we all just necked it, and it was like, this is our drink.
No way.
I wouldn't advise it, but. And that was us, and it felt, I suddenly felt it's going to be all right. I've not got this looming debt, which, it was quite a lot by that point. And I think that was one of my main worries was that, but then it was like, wow, we actually get to try this. We actually get to make a record in a studio, and, work with Paul Epworth and Al O'Connell, who was the engineer. It was just, I think from then, and arriving at East Coast Studios in London was like, this is happening, and these songs are good. We were like, we have written some good ones. We just want to get that across on a record. So I think that was like this. We were up and running, and it's suddenly things opened up, and it was kind of positive. And I think even if that hadn't happened, I chat about Paul with this sometimes. We would still be making music, even if we hadn't met each other. I'd still probably be doing, demos or putting things on Bandcamp, in the same way I kind of do with solo stuff. That's still, I just want to make stuff, and I want to try stuff. It's still there. And then it works alongside the band, which is a different thing. It's, but it was great that we had that break, but also that just people, came to the shows and playing little packed out gigs everywhere was just at that point was great.
What you said there about, making your own, all members of the band or you and Paul at least making stuff on the side for yourselves or whatever it may be. I imagine quite a lot of members of bands feel like they shouldn't or can't, which, I think is bullshit. And I think that's really nice that you have that freedom, that outlook on that stuff.
Yeah. I think some people around us probably prefer if we wouldn't, and that we just did Maximo Park. I think some people, yeah, it's difficult because, and I understand that, but I think, well, for me, like when, we made a certain trigger and then Our Earthly Pleasures, and then I was kind of writing a lot of stuff, and I'd written this album, Seeing Double, which was my own album. So it was kind of the third album I did for Walk was actually my own album. And at the time, I didn't even think that it would be an issue or a problem. And I just gave it to Steve, and he was like, "Oh, this is great, Dunk. I'll put this out. Excellent. Yeah, this is, He goes, God, another set of bangers." He was like a brilliant guy from Sheffield, like just enthusiastic about everything. It was great in that way. But I think as well, I did suddenly think, we were sat around a table figuring out how to put it out. And this was before Maximo's third album. And I could sense a little bit of dissatisfaction maybe from management. I'm sure they would admit it. But I think they were just worried. They were probably worried, "Oh, I'm off. I'm going to go off and do this." But I was like, no, this is just another part of who I am and what I do. And I'm not threatening anything. I'm not trying to rock the boat. It's just when you meet music, that's what musicians do. And it's sometimes trying to explain that they're not just one thing. They will tend to go off. And I think it's a shame that if there are people in bands that want to try something and are worried about upsetting the other members, it's like, even if you just talk to them and say, I'm with you and we're going to do this, but I do want to try other things because, I just got these ideas that I can't fully realize unless I just go out and try them. And in the long run, that helps the band because of the freedom, certainly in our band, that say me and Paul have, and I mean Tom as well. He works with other people. Tom, the drummer, he goes off and does stuff which he's drummed with loads of people. He's a great drummer, and arranger. Tom's got just a brilliant mind for arranging. So that's kind of anyone who kind of works either with us or if we work on our own. We always feel that strengthens us when we get back together. It's like, well, I've been through that, and that's been something else. And now I feel I'm kind of fresh again. I'm ready. Let's get together. Let's try something new. And this album felt very much like that. We had about 4 years in between, really.
Yeah.
But meeting Ben Allen as well, he was like, right, I want 40 songs off you guys. And we were like, okay.
4-0.
Yeah. And we were like, that's a bit of a challenge, but I like that. That's okay. Fair enough. And some were, they were a minute long, and some were 6 minutes long. Now it's the three of us really were making the record because Lucas, left, our keyboardist, left to live in Australia. He got married to an Australian and moved out to Melbourne.
Was that a turning point when that happened?
It was a bit. I mean, we'd been together a long time as a group, and it ended on very good terms. And it's just, I think it's great that he's decided to do what he's doing. And I think for us, we could have taken it as a knock, but I think we took it as, right, okay, it's a new challenge, and in some way there is a space that has opened, and it has allowed the music to be more spacious in a way. And it's been fascinating for me as well, I guess, in some ways, to be able to write on the piano, because we didn't want to lose the kind of keyboardy side, the synth side of the band. So we made a point. I was like, right, I will write songs on synths and pianos just because there is a sound there, and I think there's certainly fans of ours like that sort of side as well. And
what you said about being angular, to me, a lot of that synth stuff is angular.
Yeah, and a lot of that is Lucas. He's like and his rhythms were like just like whoa, sort of transy, robot-y sort of stuff. So, and sometimes you'd be like, man, just chill out on the This is meant to be this is a love song. What you on about?
Yeah.
He's like, but sometimes that would be the element that would make it stand out. So you
definitely, yeah.
Yeah, so you kind of respected it. And again, you got to go through all these different sounds and try this stuff out to find what's right for the song. And so in some way that definitely, I think that angular reference comes from that. But I mean, I think with the new stuff, it has felt, and we invited Ben Allen in also as a musician. We said, if you want to play, we want you to kind of join." He was like, "Brilliant,
Mm.
oh, this is great, man!" And he came over to Newcastle for a day, and we got some stuff down, and we shared some bass duties and keyboard duties, and you did some quick editing and stuff. And
that must help, knowing that he's invested as well. I've made records where producers have played instruments, and it certainly helped in a number of ways of them just being invested in it. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, it's like you're inviting them in and saying, "Look, we want it to be like open and creative. It's not, this stuff isn't precious. This stuff needs to be messed around with. It needs to find its own thing that's, perhaps away from the demo." And sometimes you find yourself going back to the vibe of the demo or whatever. Like, I think many people find that, where sometimes there's something captured there. But having him invited in to, we knew as well, like his production, obviously being fans of stuff like Deer Hunter and Animal Collective, and even like a lot of his early hip hop production, he had so many amazing stories about working with, hip hop artists and waiting there all day, and they'll be playing Halo, during the day on the PlayStation or whatever, waiting for the artist to turn up, and it'd be 2 a.m, and there'd just be a whole crowd turn up, and there'd be this party in the, and everybody just, that was the time to make kind of hip hop a lot of the time where he lived. And it was only later that he branched out into sort of guitar stuff, but he has those sensibilities, certainly with synths and the subby kind of beats and stuff that are added to, the kit. There's loads of cool stuff that he does. And that's a great thing working with producers. I found over the years, the tips you pick up, the tricks that you pick up through, and you think they've just seen so many different artists, and they pick up tricks from artists and vice versa. And we would have Zoom calls about, how to make a bass sound really good, because I love geeking out on that sort of stuff. So we would be there going, let's find out. And, a lot of it is down to the player, but it's, you can do this and you can do that. And he's in Atlanta. So we were meant to go to Atlanta, but that got obviously knocked on the head because of lockdown. So yeah, it was fascinating kind of doing it across, we'd have to wait till he got up, but it meant that I could do parts in the morning, and then he would be awake and I could send him stuff. It was weird. It was weird not sharing it first with the band sometimes, although the songs were there, there'd be all these extra parts, and Tom and Paul would hear them later, and I think they were like, "Well, what's that? Where's that from?" And it was fun. It was fun to kind of surprise them, but also I think Ben would do the same. He would come up with synth parts, and then Annie, who was the engineer, she's just an amazing violin player, and she just said, "Do you mind if I try something on this track?"
Brilliant.
A track called Partly of My Making, and sort of made this slightly weird sounding synth thing, which she then kind of doubled with a violin, and it's almost got a strange kind of maybe Led Zeppelin Houses of the Holy thing.
Cool.
It's
Is she in England or America?
She's in America, so she's Ben's engineer. So they
were doing it in their studio.
Yeah.
So they would be like rerouting what you'd send to them through.
Yeah, exactly. They would reamp. So I would play, say, through my amp, or I would use like a simulator or whatever, and a DI, so a direct signal. So they would just have the guitar as the guitar sounds without being plugged in. If for anyone, just because a DI, watch that, and they would feed that back through their amps in Atlanta, and so it would go through some nice, lovely vintage stuff, and they would use the microphones there, and that loads of stuff like the bass parts would get reamped, the guitar stuff, and then cool. I would do a lot of keyboards. He wanted a lot of MIDI, so sometimes we would use whatever I played. If it was something like a Juno, or like I've got this little Yamaha thing, which I can't do MIDI with, I would just give him those parts, and he would use them. But a lot of the MIDI stuff, again, he would either combine, combination of sounds, or mess with the MIDI, or mess with the sound. And it was great just to have that kind of open communication. And again, it was not, let's not be too sacred or too picky. I think one thing we said from the start is like, that's great, because you don't want to feel like you're treading on anyone's toes, I think, as a producer, but you really want to get the best out of that band. And I think maybe as well being a little longer in the tooth, we're like, no, it's cool. We're good, doesn't it? We're not too sensitive. We want it to just be as fresh and as free flowing as it can be.
Brilliant. Yeah, and I think you can hear that.
Yeah. Fingers crossed. I think there's. I think he's definitely helped us. He's put a bit of a spring back in our step. I think it was there after the break. We felt like, okay, we're good to make a new record now. So it felt good. I mean, even in a strange way, it's probably not a bad thing that we did it in lockdown. It was, it almost felt like we had more time than in a real studio. I could start work at 11 at night and work till 2, because I guess, anyone who knows who makes music, your brain just switches on at random, it might be 5 a.m. or something. You're like, why have I got these chords going through my brain? This is not right. Can you not wait till morning? But there'd be stuff like that whereas you couldn't do that in the studio. You would just turn up and, okay, let's do guitars for 2 hours, great. Just that'll do. Great. That's fine. I think that's the weird thing about studio. It's not always the best performance. It's like an immediate thing, but it's, when you work, for a lot of people work at home, they can really shape it. Maybe you got too much time at home sometimes, but I think that's it worked out well because we had a little deadline for each thing,
Duncan, it's been an absolute pleasure. There's so much stuff in here that you've said that I had no idea about, and it's great to learn about that stuff. I mean, your career's, been long and successful. It's great to hear about, the inside of that.
Yeah, no, thanks, man. I appreciate it. One thing I didn't mention that I should have shouted out, a friend of mine, Sarah Shuri, we're in a band called Nano Kino, and for me, she's one of the best songwriters up here. And I always think in an interview, I can get a bit lost about talking about other stuff. But check out Nano Kino as well, because that's it's just cool. And she's writing just mental songs. They're just so good,
So that started in 2012, I'm just reading.
Yeah, and it's we've had to work, around Maxïmo and around her, she's a teacher and stuff, but we've done shows together, but just I guess our songwriting styles, which is more like early 4AD kind of vibe.
Cool.
But it's been tricky getting, just we've sort of kept it going on a real slow burner over there, just doing it. Again, it's for the love of it, really. So, I guess for us, it's, meeting up, making some songs, sending ideas, making videos together and stuff like that. It is this, but it's a little project that's really quiet, and I sort of think I should mention it more because it is really important. And I think she's a brilliant songwriter.
And founded on a love of Cocteau Twins and Women. I haven't listened to Women, but I love Cocteau Twins.
Oh man, yeah, check out the band Women.
Which album is good to get into Women?
The first album is just called Women, and then Public Strain is the follow-up, which is also great. But when the Women album came out, that was just like, this is great, this is awesome, this is, and I thought they were American at first, of course, but then found out they're Canadian. And I remember we went to see them as a band, and I think we did get a little bit pissed with a few of them, and I remember, I think the drummer gave us some free t-shirts, and I still feel bad about, I wish so if I ever see any member of Women again, I'm gonna pay for all the t-shirts. Like, the band should not have to give away their merch, and I think it's just because we were so happy to see them. And I think we kind of hit it off with a few of them, and I think just Brilliant. Just musicians. But they are just they're just a really interesting band. And then they went on. I think some of them went on to do Viet Cong. And then bands like Cold Pumas and stuff, they did like split sevens with them. There's some really interesting. Again, it's like you can go down a rabbit hole with that stuff. There's some really good stuff. Yeah,
great. That's some homework for me.
Yeah, man, yeah.
Thank you so much. I mean, it's been 4 years since the last one, Risk to Exist.
Yeah.
Is there a precedent of time between Maxïmo Park records?
I think that's the way. Well, I think both me and Paul did some solo stuff. He did an album with did his own thing. His album called Diagrams, and I did an album called Outside Notion, which is just under my own name. So we wanted to go off and just do a bit of that stuff. And I think it was just having headspace to then work out what to do again. But actually, we have actually got some, because of all these songs we wrote for Ben, for Ben's kind of do 40 songs, lads, let's see what we can do. I think we've got a few songs that are really good that are left over. So we're looking at doing some other release with them, maybe something slightly different, but sooner. And we've got Gemma, who's joined on keyboards. She's an amazing keyboardist. So it's quite exciting because her singing voice goes really great with Paul. You can hear it a bit on the record.
Brilliant.
So I think that's something we want to explore more, and just, I think her being part of the band and a new member, that's exciting because it's new possibilities. So I think there'll be something a little sooner, and I think we're looking at doing something else, which I've got to keep under my hat at the moment. But so there should be a little bit more stuff a little sooner.
Cool. Well, I mean, now we've got a whole new record to look forward to before all of that. So
exactly, yeah. So hopefully people get into that, and see where that takes us.
Brilliant, Duncan. Thank you so much, man.
Thanks. Yeah, likewise, man. Pleasure talking with you, man.
So there we have it. Duncan Lloyd from Maxïmo Park here on 101 Part-Time Jobs. As I said at the start of the show, if you dig the stories that are coming out of these people that I've got on the show, please tell your friends, please share the link, and let's grow this together. Thanks so much for listening. Here's Sparrer.
I've been working all day for me mate on the side, running around like a blue-ass fly. I've been working all day for me mate. Every bleeding minute I've been on the go, up and down the ladder like a fiddler's elbow. I've been working all day for me mate.
This is a Mighty Moon Media podcast.